before. There's 3 traits that people, then they looked at, because they were trying to find habits of highly successful people. And when they actually pulled apart, it's not, and I hope I'm not contradicting anything, but there's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late. And there's people really rich who wake up really, really early. And there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy. And there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truths, but there's easy examples that counter those things. So it's like, what are the few things that are true, or at least that seem to be present in all of the situations? And it seems as though there were surprisingly few. And so the 3 common traits that they had found were, 1, that people have superiority complex. They believe they're better than others, and they believe that they deserve more than everyone else does, and that they can accomplish big goals, right? So they have a bigger vision because they believe they deserve it, or whatever it is, that they were able to identify that. The second thing that they were able to identify is that they had crippling insecurity, and which is a paradox of paradoxes. They feel they'll never be enough, and they'll always be measured against the things that they've achieved. And so you've got this crazy dynamic between they think they're better than everyone, they think they deserve more, they want to go after this big hill, and at the same time, they fear they'll never be good enough, they'll never actually achieve it, and they actually suck. And then the third piece, which kind of adds the beautiful mix of this, is impulse control. Right. And so they're able to control their actions and focus on a single thing for an extended period of time. And so if you put those 3 things together, it's like you've got a big goal that's pulling you this way, you've got this big fear that you are running away from, and then you've got impulse control to keep you focused on the one thing that matters. Yes. And if you do that, if you are the type of person who has those traits, then you are very likely to be successful. If you can wait a year, you can make a ton of money. If you can do something for 12 months, you can not need for financial goodness pretty much for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you're going to be hella rich, right, but you're not going to need for anything if you can wait 12 months. If you can wait a decade, you're going to be above the 1%. If you can wait 10 years for an outcome, be able to do the doing without seeing the result, you will be able to be above most achievement of most people. And if you can wait a lifetime and you don't even need to see the result of your doing this, even while you are alive, but know that it may get done after you pass, then I believe that you can change the world. And I mean that. And so I think that if people can just extend the time horizon that they're measuring themselves on, they can just do so much more. I mean, you've probably heard the Bill Gates quote where he says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. I think it's the same thing, just continue to draw it out. And I think as we've been able to, achieve more leverage and make more money, et cetera, my horizon has extended. And when I listen to the people who I want to emulate, I can almost tell by the measurement of money that they talk about and the measurement of time that they discuss how successful they are or how successful I think they're going to be. If I talk to a 25-year-old and he's talking about what he wants to do in 2 decades and his whole plan of what he's going to do, as long as he's not just blowing smoke because he's heard an interview from me, then I'm like, this kid's got it. He gets it. He gets it. And most people just don't think they can't wait 90 days. Most people can't even wait a month, right? They start a diet and 14 days later they don't have a 6-pack and they can't wait. But if you do a year, you can look whatever way you want for the most part, by and large. And if you wait a year for the ability to learn how to sell, you wait a year for the ability to learn how to market, wait a year just providing value to a group of people for free and then delaying your ask, you can do whatever you want. The difference between a self-made billionaire who started with nothing and someone who else started with nothing is not the resources, obviously, because they both started at zero. So what else is it? It's their resourcefulness, not the resources. And so if we give power to circumstance, then we cast power outside of ourselves. If we give power to other people, we cast power outside of ourselves. And so it's controlling the controllable. You can take pride in the fact that you admit that there's a deficit. Right? But the only thing you can't take pride in is casting and being a victim. Even if you're right, it doesn't serve you. And so it's owning the fact that you are the only person who can actually change anything about your life, because you may blame your circumstances, but no one else will care.
If you want to change your behavior, the strongest way to do it is to simply change your environment, because you can have huge leaps and bounds in how much your behavior changes without even having to get better. You usually have to take a step back in order to take 2, 3, 10 steps forward. Why don't people do the stuff that they want to do? I think it's because they can't even hear their own voice, because the only voice they can hear is everyone else's. Theirs is barely a whisper.
Because right now you're probably not doing something because you're like, I'm too busy. I'll start when it's convenient, whatever. If you say that as the excuse for not doing something, then there's an assumption underlying that says that if I get busy again in the future, I will stop. And so do you want the success that you want to be long-term? Yes. Then do you believe that you'll never be busy again for the rest of your life? No. So then you might as well start when you're busy so that you have the most support. Because if you learn how to do it when you're busy and when it gets quiet, you'll succeed even more. And when it gets busy again, you know how to do it because that's how you started.
I think about death all the time. It's like, I'm going to die. And I think you have to agitate the pain for yourself. Like, you have to stoke the pain. When you are starting out, I think you got to find the thing that's the pain. And like, pain motivates significantly faster and stronger than pleasure does. Like, people are like, no, passion's the right way. It's like, point a gun at a family member. All of a sudden, 10 out of 10 motivation. Pain. And so like, I think people should use their pain more.
I think we'd have to boil it down to what are the obstacles to taking action. So either you take the wrong actions, which is a knowledge deficit, which is why everyone who's listening to this, it's like you want to learn, right? Which is great. I define learning as same circumstance or same condition, different behavior. Meaning, if I show you a flashcard that's red and then I slap you, if I show you the flashcard again and you duck, then you have learned. Same condition, new behavior. Intelligence is the rate of learning. So how quickly do you change your behavior with the same condition? So if I show someone a red flashcard and then I slap them and then I show them again, they don't move and I slap them, I show it again and I slap them, it's like, what are you? Right? Their rate of learning is not as fast. And so to the same degree, and this is for, I know this is gonna, I'm gonna poke my finger in this hole real quick. For everyone who's listening to this, if you continue to listen and listen and listen and listen, and your conditions externally have not changed, and your behaviors have not changed, then it means you have learned nothing. If you can control enough of the environment, you can get anyone to do anything. Which is, to the same degree, we even kind of accept this culturally as like, if someone kills somebody, we say, was there temporary insanity? What were the extraneous conditions that created this behavior? Now, if there's like, he came home from the military and his wife was in bed with somebody and he just went into a fit of rage, well, that was a condition. Now, we then say the guy who, premeditated it, and that's a bad guy. But then you zoom out a little bit more and you're like, well, what conditions created that behavior?
Right.
So these conditions are excusable and these conditions aren't, which gets into a whole different argument. But the point is that if you want to change your behavior, the strongest way to do it is to simply change your environment. Because you can have huge leaps and bounds in how much your behavior changes without even having to get better. Which is why one of the best ways to get good at anything is to join a team of people who are excellent at that thing. And you know this from the sports world. Like, if you can join a championship team, you automatically adopt the cultural norms, the rules of behavior of that group. And you either get assimilated or you get rejected if the culture's strong enough. Yes. If it's a championship team. And so I think that is the absolute shortcut, the cheat code to getting what you want is changing everything around you. So like, if everybody around you is poor, don't listen to them about how to get rich. And don't seek their approval for your behavior, because everything that they're going to approve of is keeping you where you're at. And so I think if you have enough money to leave home, then do so. If you can't leave the town you're in, then move across town. Just go 30 minutes away. Just go on the other side of town. Make it more convenient to do the things that you want to do. Make it less convenient to hang out with the people and do the stuff that you don't want to be doing. And if you do enough of those, make it easier, make it harder trade-offs, eventually you start doing more of the stuff that you want to do and less of the stuff you don't. And that compounds. And I think a lot of times that is a lot easier than trying to willpower your way through anything, because willpower is finite. If there is no ice cream in the freezer and you have to get in your car to then go somewhere to get it's a lot
harder.
It's a bigger thing, right? So it's like, how can I make it as inconvenient as possible to do the things that I don't want to do? Hate only comes from below. Like, no one above you is hating on you because they're not thinking about you, because winners focus on the goal, losers focus on winners.
You can define sales as the ability to get people to comply with your request. You can define leadership the same way. Management, marketing to a degree is getting people to comply with a larger request, publicly. But I think that fundamentally is a skill that people have to have if they're going to be successful at entrepreneurship. They have to have tremendous drive, whether that's a combination of towards or away. So they have a big mission that they really want to achieve, or they have some very big fear that they're running away from. Either way, I think the fuel works, just from a pure entrepreneurship perspective. The third piece is impulse control, is that they have to be able to say no to things on a regular basis for an extended period of time. And I think they have to be able to boil down the success of their business into inputs and outputs. For most entrepreneurs, like, if they have those things, if they have the ability to lead other people / sell, just influence, they have some big motivator, they can control themselves long enough to keep ongoing during that period of time, and they are doing the right things because they know the inputs and outputs to be successful or to create the thing that they want, becomes a very difficult person to beat.
there's three traits that people then they looked at, because they were trying to find habits of highly successful people. And when they actually pulled apart, it's not, and I hope I'm not contradicting anything. But there's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late. And there's people really rich who wake up really, really early. And there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy. And there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truths, but there's easy examples that counter those things. So it's like, what are the few things that are true, or at least that seem to be present in all of the situations? And it seems as though there were surprisingly few. And so the three common traits that they had found were, one, that people have superiority complex. They believe they're better than others, and they believe that they deserve more than everyone else does, and that they can accomplish big goals, right? So they have a bigger vision because they believe they deserve it, or whatever it is, that they were able to identify that. The second thing that they were able to identify is that they had crippling insecurity, and which is a paradox of paradoxes. They feel they'll never be enough, and they'll always be measured against the things that they've achieved. And so you've got this crazy dynamic between they think they're better than everyone, they think they deserve more, they want to go after this big hill, and at the same time, they fear they'll never be good enough, they'll never actually achieve it, and they actually suck. And then the third piece, which kind of adds the beautiful mix of this, is impulse control. And so they're able to control their actions and focus on a single thing for an extended period of time. And so if you put those three things together, it's like you've got a big goal that's pulling you this way. You've got this big fear that you are running away from. And then you've got impulse control to keep you focused on the one thing that matters. Yes. And if you do that, if you are the type of person who has those traits, then you are very likely to be successful.
No one wants to say they're afraid, because if you say you're afraid, then it means you're a coward. I'd rather be a failure than a coward. The first big, felt like a death decision was, I was a consultant, 22-ish years old. I had a paid for, condo that I bought overlooking the city. And I remember thinking, I really hope I don't wake up tomorrow. And what was difficult about that was that at that time was when my father was most proud of me. Because I was doing everything that was according to plan. He could talk about his son who graduated in 3 years from Vanderbilt, had the good job, everything we're following the plan. It was upon realizing that my ultimate expression of living out his dream was me feeling like I didn't want to be alive. And I realized that one of our dreams had to die, either his or mine. To put this in perspective of how afraid of my father's judgment I was, I left the state and drove across the country halfway through before calling him to tell him that I was gone. And so I bring this up because I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but I'm saying that if you feel a lot of pressure, I get it. I tried to leave the job that I was at to pursue just literally anything that wasn't that. I wanted to start a business at some point. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that what I was doing was not the path I wanted to be on. Our relationship struggled for, years after that. And I also bring that up because sometimes there's this illusion that you get on the Oscar stage or whatever it is, and you're like, hey, I just want to thank, my mom, my dad, my friends for always supporting me. And I can't say that. And I wish I could. And you might not be able to say that either. And I also don't think that's a reason not to do it. And I think that when you ask the original question, what are the people from 0 to 1 really looking for? I read tons of business books at that time, but I couldn't use any of them because I was so afraid. And what's crazy is that I think about it now in retrospect, and it's crazy how large the perceived monsters can appear. And Layla has this quote that I love, but it's, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And so you look at it and it looks like this ocean, and then you take the first step and you realize you don't drown, because it's oh, there's ground underneath of this, right? There's other people who are more on my path, and the friends you lose, you gain new friends, right? And so that fear was the hardest decision that I've had to overcome in my entrepreneurial career. And I think of all the split paths in my life, that was the one that if I had many timelines or many universes that existed, that was probably the one that is the most likely that I would not have parted from. So I think in 90% of universes that Alex Hormozi exists, I'm just a consultant somewhere. And so I would encourage you, if you do feel that, you're not going to die. You won't die, and you might just live. No one wants to say they're afraid, because if you say you're afraid, then it means you're a coward. And I think that it only means you're a coward if you allow that fear to change your behavior in an aversive way, as in it not towards what you want. And so
the inverse of that, many people have heard it, courage is not acting without fear, but despite fear. And I think that when you allow fear to change your behavior the wrong way, that is when you can give yourself that title of coward. And I think that that is a title that I have feared my whole life. And that label is I'm more afraid of that label than the label of failure. I would rather be a failure than a coward. There's a tweet that I love by Andrew Wilkinson, which is, every entrepreneur ever, here's the winning number for my lottery ticket. And so it's like every entrepreneur will say, here's the winning lottery ticket, but it's like that drawing already happened.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And so like you can't cash that ticket in, it's already done. And so people say the word first principles, no one really knows what it means. Some people do, but basically there are foundational truths of business that exist, and the conditions of the environment will change. And so you have to apply those truths to whatever the current condition is. And so that's what I try and tease out with the books and the stuff that I put out in content. But at the end of the day, you have an input of time, like zooming all the way out. Assuming that your goal is to make money, okay, and this is just a purely economic business goal, then you have time, which is the primary currency that you trade it, and you make dollars over a period of time. And so I tend to reject the idea of never trade time for dollars or anything like that, because everyone trades time for dollars. It's just some of us are more efficient at it than others. But even exchanges that occur that just are not denominated in time still occur over time. And so you have this foundational unit of time, which you're going to give in. What we're seeking is the highest return on that time. And so within a business context, there's kind of three levels of things that have to occur in a business. You have to, attract attention, you have to convert attention, and then you have to deliver something for that attention. And so, which is, you need supply and demand to have a business, and then leverage to get as much out of it as you possibly can. And so, when you're looking at the assets that you have, assets can also be skills, resources, what you have available to you. Now, if you have nothing, then all you have is your brain, your hands, and the time that you have that you can put towards learning something, which is why I'm a big fan of skill acquisition as one of the primary things that you can do is educating yourself. And not formally educating, but informally or alternatively educating yourself on super tactical things. Once you get over the fear, then you start asking, okay, how do I let people know about my stuff? And what do I let them know? Right? And so you have to have something to sell, which is the offer. And ideally, you want the offer to have as much leverage as possible. Like, so if you sold software or you sold media, those are things that you can cut once, sell 1,000 times. If you have a conversion mechanism, it's like you can't have it be automated like a checkout page or some sort of video sales letter or something like that where people just buy without a phone salesperson. If you add a phone salesperson, there's less leverage. Not to say this wrong, but you want to have the highest leverage opportunity. And then from the deliverability perspective, I kind of talked about deliverability first, but from the advertising perspective, if you reach out to people one-on-one, that's lower leverage than being able to make one piece of content that a million people see, right? And so over time, you go from low leverage to high leverage, where you have the same inputs, but you just get significantly more for your output. And that fundamentally is like, if we're reasoning out from first principles, how do I get said differently, the question someone I think is really asking is, how do I get the most for what I put in? And you have to reason within your current context of your skills and your resources and your assets in order to derive that solution for you. Business ideas typically come from one of three Ps. So it comes from a pain that you're currently experiencing, a past profession, so the thing that you just quit or some of the jobs that you just quit, or a passion. Mm-hmm. So something that you're inherently interested in that you would spend your time doing anyways, some skill that you learned while you were in the workforce, which by the way is one of the most proven ways of making money because the economy has already showed you that people are willing to exchange money for that specific job. And so in the world of gig economies and solopreneurs, every business can be dismantled into just jobs being done, and all of those jobs can be fractionalized. So anybody, we look at any business, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got customer success, you've got customer support if you want to differentiate that, you've got product, you've got design, you've got web pages. There's so many different components to a business. You just need to learn one of them. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, boom, you have a skill that you can trade for money that you don't have anybody else to report to. And then pain is usually, I think, in some ways, sometimes one of the biggest drivers is like you had an eating allergy and you couldn't find
pancakes that dealt with your specific eating allergy. And you bet that there's a decent amount of other people with that allergy that also like pancakes. And so then you make pancakes that are delicious and amazing that also cater to people with that food allergy. And then all of a sudden, like, you have a business based on pain.
And why does that matter?
I think that deep knowledge of the prospect is paramount or very important for creating exceptional products. And you can either do that by doing a ton of research or by being the prospect. I met the guy who invested in Regal Cinemas, which is probably the biggest chain in the US. And it was when there was a guy who had just one theater, and it became, now obviously COVID has disrupted that business, but for 20 years, whatever, they crushed. And he said it was so weird to say that, oh, cinemas are going to make a comeback, because they'd kind of been on a downturn or something like that during the time that he was making the investment. And he said, the reason I decided to invest in it was because this guy knew everything about the business down to how much the cost of a kernel of popcorn was. And he just knew it so like the back of his hand that he was like, this guy can't fail. Like, he just knows too much about this business to not have it work. And so in investing in, making $1 gazillion. And so, but I think that deep understanding, and if you look at all of these, the passion things, you'll have deep understanding because you're spending all of your discretionary time pursuing this passion. The pain, you have a deep understanding of the problem and the prospects going through it because you've experienced it probably for years. Now, the professional one, I would say, is a bit of a shortcut, because if you're quitting the job because you don't like it, and then you say, I'm now going to do this for myself, well, you're okay. The one proven point about that is that one is proven to work from an economic perspective. You will be able to make money doing that because you already have made money doing it. I was talking to, on one of the future episodes of Mozi Tank that's coming out, we have a guy who's, he loves Dungeons and Dragons. So he's an IT guy and just loves Dungeons and Dragons. And he was like, I just want this to make enough money that I don't have to do IT anymore. But it was so pure, you know what I mean? And so I was like, we're going to help you do this. And so we kind of walked through the business plan for it. But like, is he going to be a billionaire? No, but I also don't think that's his goal. And so I think being really clear on what you want is important. So if you're like, I want to be the richest person in the world, I think it's a terrible goal. But if you want that, great. Well, you have to have a multi-trillion-dollar idea because by the time that occurs, there's already multi-trillion-dollar companies now. So you got to be looking at like decatrillion-dollar opportunity. And so, believe it or not, basically the bigger the goal, the narrower the scope of the paths to get there. If you're like, I want to make $10 million, I'm like, you can literally do that in almost any business. You want to make $100 million, probably still almost any business you can do it. On a long enough time horizon, you can do it. A trillion or decatrillion, it's going to be some sort of tech. It's probably going to have some sort of AI. And so you get, basically the bigger the goal is, the narrower the scope of how to get there. But the vast majority of people are like, I want to be the richest man in the world, just because they don't know how to like really think through it and be like, all right, well, after like 100, there's really nothing you can't do except buy more big things. But like in terms of your actual consumption, maybe even 20 is like, you can only eat at restaurants that go so expensive. You can only stay at the best hotels. You can only drive the nicest cars. You can do that with about 25 million. What's crazy is delay discounting happens both ways. Like, so like you set your alarm for 5 a.m. at night and you're like, I'm going to wake up at 5. But that's because you're delaying the pain of waking up. And when it's immediate, when I have to quit the job, like I'll quit my job tomorrow for 20 years. And so it's just like, we delay the fact that we're going to be miserable into the present, we massively discount what a whole lifetime of misery would be. It can't reason the logic chain of causation and causality of what's going to happen next in a chain of events. And so when you get into the specific of it, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm not going to be homeless and then shamed and die. I might live in inferior living conditions for a short period, which, by the way, when you're later on in your life, you'll look back and think of as the good old days, because I can't believe I was couch surfing, I was pursuing my dreams, right? It's only like in the moment that it feels bad. When you look back, like even, I find this hilarious, like how long after you do something embarrassing is it funny? Right? Like at some point for almost all of us, with enough time, the shameful experience becomes funny. And so if it is going to become funny eventually, it might as well become funny now. Also, logic downside risk here. I'll have a story and I can always get my job back. Okay. And if I can't get that job back, I'll have other ones that will be available. Fine. And if I have a downgrading and some people think that I'm not as successful as them, okay. I'll not stop though. Like, and you just kind of play it out and you're like, okay, I think I have like most of these conditions prepared for. And then all of a sudden you can like have those things.
if you want to be compelling, a demonstration or a model is always more compelling than anything else. And so me even going through that entire narrative, right, is taking everyone else who's been listening to this on some journey. It's like, if you want to make a compelling pitch for a business, it's like, we pretty much just kind of went through one. And so that's really what it comes down to. You're like, well, what do I do with my business? It's like, create your narrative of why you're even doing this. And if you can explain to somebody why they should care about this problem, or more specifically, why you care about this problem, I'll tell you this, more investors will, like, I might be like, I don't care about kitchen utensils, but this girl certainly does. And I'm sure there's other women who do too. And what everyone wants to see is obsession. And unfortunately, in like some of the world, I know more in the UK than the US now, like that kind of perspective of like just being all in obsessed with stuff has almost been like bastardized, or like, been chastised. But the people who are obsessed are the ones who change the world, at least change their world. And so a lot of times we don't look at what I call the don't, which is like the alternate path. And so if I had played out my existing path, I had a guarantee of outcome I didn't want. It was just at a delay. Whereas here, there's a chance that I can make it. And so one of the final kind of frameworks for making the decision was guarantee bad, chance at good. And I was like, well, I might as well take a chance. And I strongly encourage thinking about playing it out. And so what I mean by that is, like, I think fear exists in the vague, not in the specific. And so when you say, I'm going to quit my job, and then what if this doesn't work? I'm going to failure, tons of fear. If I say, I'm going to quit my job, and then I'm going to try and start a business, and if the business doesn't work, I'll probably have a compelling story that I could tell for business school if I wanted to show that I had some entrepreneurial slant. In the meantime, I could use that experience plus my job experience to probably get another or maybe even better job in the meantime and match or supersede my existing income. And the actual loss would be maybe the savings that I had saved up. But if I'm younger or I haven't made as much money as I want, then that's never been the amount of money that would be material anyways on the grand scheme of what I would like to make. And in terms of living situation, I will, worst case, go back to my parents' house with my tail between my legs, or sleep at a friend's couch because I have enough people that would be willing to put me up in a garage if I had to. And so it's like, okay, so my actual worst case scenario is just like, I have a cool story and maybe some shame that is self-inflicted, because it's not like no one else cares really. But it's self-inflicted shame and maybe a detour or a different story that I have to tell later on in my career. Not as much fear there, right? But like the first one, like, I'll fail, everyone will hate me, and I'll die. Basically, anybody who's listening, the harder it is for you to break free of whatever kind of mental prison you've made for yourself, whether that's real or just in your head, the more compelling your story will be when you break through it.
You want to hear something absolutely insane? If nobody knows who you are, it's actually a good thing. And so imagine this is you, and you're here because you have no followers, and of course you're very sad by that, or at least you think you are. Maybe you're crying very sad tears, right? And you don't have this massive audience like these big celebrities or influencers do. And I'm just going to explain 3 reasons why this will help you win. My name is Alex Hormozi. I'm the founder of acquisition.com. We make huge sums of money that are unreasonable. So much so that I can have unnecessary extra camera angles like this one and this one and this one. But I will give you my quick disclaimer, which is that everything that I'll share with you, I'm an experienced business person and marketer, and so these are no way promises that you will achieve anything at all, mostly because most people do absolutely nothing. That being said, let's dive in. So number 1 is that you're an underdog. So the first and most important point of being unheard of is that every position actually has an advantage. And so, for example, let me tell you a story. So I had a company called Allen, which I ended up selling 75% of 4 years ago, 2021, however many years ago that was. While I was working inside of Allen, we had B2B customers. We had agency owners. And so an agency owner got on the phone with me, and he actually was serving gym owners. Now, at the time, I still owned Gym Launch, the company that I ended up selling also in 2021. He said, I feel like it's not fair that I have to compete with you. Now, mind you, I'm like here trying to help this guy grow his business, even though he is technically a competitor of mine by selling to gym owners. I made this point to him that I thought was worth making probably for you, which it doesn't really matter where you're at in business. Like, I think one, you should always try and think like an underdog. If you're in the apparel space, you're always competing with Nike. And so like you're an underdog compared to Nike. But I think the underdog mentality is a winning mentality because underdogs are the ones who win ultimately. And the people who are at the top of the mountain are the ones who are fat and happy and end up getting taken over by the underdog. And so, I mean, Jeff Bezos talks about this. He says it's always day one at Amazon, is that they want to keep that mentality. And part of the reason is why they are so big is that they still maintain that flexibility. So I want to hit on some of these advantages. In talking to this agency owner, he was struggling and he said, everybody who gets on the phone with me says, well, you're not Gym Launch and, give me your track record, how long you've been doing this, things like that. And he was like, I just don't really have a good response. And so I said, well, have you considered that one, when I started, I was in your position? And so one, it's possible. Number two is that your advantage is that you're not me, right? So if we're the biggest person in the space, which Gym Launch is arguably the biggest, the market leader in that industry, the advantage that I have as Gym Launch is I'm going to say, hey, this guy, Adrian, is in his mama's basement and has no track record. And if you want Coca-Cola Classic and you want to know that you have success stories and there's tons of case studies and tons of proof of gyms just like yours seeing this level of success, we know that our system works. You just have to run the system, right? And so that's fairly compelling. Now, what do you say in response to that? Well, what you would say to the prospect is like, listen, well, you don't want to work with Gym Launch because to them, you're just a number. You're never going to meet Alex. You're never going to probably even talk to him. He's not going to know your name, right? You're going to get assigned some account rep, right, that doesn't care either. And they're just going to be running through some like checklist with you. Whereas for me, you're going to have my cell phone number. If you need anything, you can call me whenever you want. And it's actually me. And so who you're really comparing is not, my company versus Gym Launch. It's me versus their rep who they would assign you to. And I can promise you, I'm far more dedicated to seeing you succeed than they are. Compelling. Of course, both positions have advantages. And so you want to play the cards you're dealt. Only a loser's perspective that their position in some way dictates how the end is going to happen, right? Because one of the beautiful things about having nothing to lose is that you also have everything to gain. And so what it means is that you also have unlimited shots on goal. Because if you miss, you're just back at zero, which is exactly where you are. So you have essentially risk-free unlimited upside, which I think people wildly underestimate the advantage of the underdog, which is why, in terms of game theory, they're the most dangerous player on the board because they can't lose. And that perspective was ultimately what got me to even quit my job in the very beginning was, worst case scenario, I just get my job back. So that means that like I have risk-free shots. It's like life giving you a lottery ticket. The only thing you pay for is with time, but you still have unlimited upside every time you scratch it off. To me, not a bad gig. And to be clear, I have the portfolio that we have now and it's all this money and success, whatever. But like I had 9 businesses that amounted to almost nothing before I had my first real big win. And unless you're Mark Zuckerberg or you're Jeff Bezos, which is not common, most people fail the first time and the second and the third. And sometimes what happens is that the failures just become less failure. Like in the beginning, no one buys anything. But you do remember building the logo on the website and thinking that you had a business, but like nothing happens, right? And then finally you make your first sale, but you're like, this isn't a real business. Like what's going on here? Like I exchanged money, so I guess I technically am in business. Do I have to pay taxes on this now? Like what happens, right? And then eventually you get to one where you're like, okay, now I'm starting to sell stuff and make money, but like I'm not actually making money. I'm making revenue, but I'm making no profit. I'm like incurring all this risk and all this debt in order to get it going. And you're like still trying to figure it out. And then on like your 4th try, you're like, oh, what do you know? I made a profit and it took me 5 years to get here. Every entrepreneur that I know, so I don't know Zuck and I don't know Jeff Bezos, so unfortunately I'm not there. But the guys that I know, almost all of us like failed for a while. Like I don't know anybody who like crushed it in their first 5 years. Like most people like basically ate glass and stared into the abyss, to quote Elon Musk, which is just existential dread at all points in time. And the eating glass is the fact that all you do all day is deal with problems, which are mostly revolve around people. And somehow you're supposed to get work done in between. So if you're in that kind of underdog position, you can pop open the Leads book. And I have a chapter that I wrote on this, which is called More Better News. So it's 161, and I actually tell some of this story that I'm telling you right now. And one of the things that most smaller underdogs, really no matter what size you are relatively, have this belief that's false. And so I want to kind of crush it for you. Real quick, the reason for this ad is I'm throwing the entrepreneur event of the season and you're invited. This is going to be my biggest book ever. No, not like that. This is going to be my biggest book. Well, not even like that. This is going to be my biggest book ever. Actually, not even like that. This is going to be my biggest book ever. $100 million Money Models. And I've been preparing to release this book to you for over 2 years. And at the launch event, August 16th, I'm going to be showing you how to get more customers to spend more money with you in less time over and over again. It's the most valuable skill set I have. Now, on top of that, come check this out. I've got 5 mystery headliners that have all confirmed they're going to be there live, and they've never before shared the same stage, and most of these people don't speak publicly. Now, on top of that, I have 4 amazing bonuses that are available to anyone who wants to pre-order a book. You don't have to, because you can register for free for that, you can show up for free, you can enjoy all of that for nothing. But if you want to pre-order a copy of the book, I got 4 bonuses for you. Now, on top of that, I've got one project that I've been working on for the last 2 years that I'll be unveiling live. And I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you that it's better than an NFT, it's less than a Bitcoin, and every single person who shows up live gets one. So, if you want it, click, register. I'll see you there live, August 16th. Pre-order a book if you want. It's going to be awesome. So, number one is that the volatility that you're experiencing is a result of inadequate volume. So, you're not doing enough, which gives the appearance of volatility. So, let me say it differently. If you were to sell one person every like 3 to 5 weeks, and you're like, yeah, every month I get like 1 customer, sometimes I get 2 customers, what that really means is that there's a certain amount of advertising activity that is occurring, whether it's you doing it, or it's other people doing it on your behalf, or it's word of mouth. Any of those things are happening, and it takes that much volume for you to get 1 new customer. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, how can I take the amount of advertising that's occurring over 4 weeks to get me 1 customer and crush it into 1 day so I get 1 new customer every day? That's all it is. The volume, increasing volume negates luck and will give you consistency. The second piece is understanding where you actually sit here. Page 168, the size of the pie fallacy. So the issue is that most small businesses think that it's like this. They start advertising on one channel. They're really happy. Look at this big smiley face. Okay. Then a competitor comes in and they start advertising on the same channel. And then in their minds, they think, oh no, I have half of this market now. And then all of a sudden, 2 more competitors come in. And now you're like, oh no, I have a quarter of this market. It's shrinking fast. It's so saturated. But that's a fallacy. That's a lie. It's an illusion. This is what it looks like in reality. So most people see their market as one method, one platform, one medium. They're like, well, I make Instagram Reels, and that's how I get my customers. So anybody else who makes Instagram Reels, they're my market, and it's saturated. But the reality is that there's so many ways to get customers. You can do warm outreach. You can do cold outreach. You can post content. You can run ads. You can have affiliates. You could have referral networks. You could have employees doing this on your behalf. You could have agencies and headhunters who bring people in. All of these different vehicles for advertising. And then within those vehicles, now you have the platforms of all those things, right? So it's like you're making content on LinkedIn. You're making content on Twitter. You're making content on podcasts. You're making content on TikTok, right, for however long it lasts, right? So all of these different platforms, it's like, so really, that little circle that you have is just this tiny itty bitty circle here, and all of these other circles and all of these other methods and all of these other mediums are basically empty. And so the reality is no one knows you exist. And so the answer is you have to advertise more. You have to let more people know about your stuff. And so the way that we do this is we do the rule of 100. All right, and so by method, that means, that's page 164, you either do 100 reach outs a day, cold or warm, you do 100 minutes of making content and post something, which for some reason I didn't put that in the book. No, I said release it 1 per day, thank God. All right, but some people hear that first line and they're like, I'm making 100 minutes of content a day, and I'm like, I haven't seen you post. They're like, well, I'm still working on it. I'm like, what are you doing? Post. All right, and then Paid ads is 100 minutes a day of making paid ads. So that's doing the research, looking at other hooks, recording, editing, cutting it, and spending money, right? You got to spend money. And the amount of money you spend, I would say per month, should be relative to what you're willing to pay per customer. Okay. Now, I have an update to this that I'll share with you, which we learned from the school games, because I help a lot of people who are starting out. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're brand new or you're an experienced business owner. If you start a new channel, you're still starting at zero, right? And one of the things that we added in for at least the content side was most of the times you'll be limited by, the amount that you can make, and sometimes even the amount of DMs that you can do on a social platform. But one thing that's not really limited or less limited is the amount of comments that you can leave on other people's posts. And so what you want to do, the goal is to have the best comment on a post that is relevant to your avatar. So basically it's like all of these posts exist, and they're almost like free ads that you think are attracting the attention of your avatar. And so what you want to do is have the most thoughtful response to that post, and then you basically kind of like hitch a ride on somebody else's views, and it's totally legal. So like do that on top of this. And this is for those of you who are like, I just don't know what to do. This is what you do. You reach out to people, you make content, you run ads, pick one. And to be clear, this is Alex's 2 cents, so this is a personal opinion. I don't really tear people down. I just don't do that. Some people like make their whole brands on dunking on other people. I just don't like that kind of negativity personally, like in my life or otherwise. You're welcome to do whatever you want. My recommendation would be to give people flowers and, basically give them props, which is what I think millennials say, for when they do a good job. So I'm dating myself here. Flowers, right? Tell them they did a good job and basically break down or add to it. Say like, I love all this and I think that's a great way. So instead of saying, basically this is and thinking instead of or thinking. So my first piece of homework is write what your advantage is in your current position. So if you're Nike, and Nike, if you do want to respond to this video, I'm totally okay with it. But if you're not Nike, right? Talk about the unique angle that you have compared to the leader in your marketplace. Because let's be real, the vast majority of people who are watching this are not the leader. Because there's only one leader and everybody else who's not the leader is more people than the one. So the likelihood that you're not the leader is high. So talk about how you're different than they are in a way that is factually correct, that they cannot argue with. And drop it in the comments. I'd love to see them. And everything that I just talked to you about, those positions is what I would weave into my sales and my marketing. Because the nice thing there is it's not like claims-based. It's just like, these are the facts, and this is the reality of it. And if you ever want to make more compelling marketing, the thought that I would give you is just drill one level deeper. At the surface level, it's like it's David and Goliath. But like when you actually drill down, it's an unfair advantage because David isn't really competing against Goliath. It's competing against Goliath's like kneecap, right? It's like, it's the piece of the larger thing. There's this amorphous idea of Nike, but really all you're competing against is the person who's 6 levels down who got hired out of college to make their social media posts for one specific, person or whatever. That's who you have to beat. And so like the way that you beat the Roman Empire isn't by taking the Roman Empire on head on. It's by tiny little nibbles on the edge of their kind of perimeter and just working your way in. And fundamentally, that's how the barbarians over time, crunch down on Rome. And so in this instance, we are the barbarians. Now, part 2, it's actually much easier to figure out a smaller business than a bigger one. And let me explain. So you've probably heard the idea that if you have a boat, right, it's much easier to turn a dinghy than it is to turn the Titanic. Well, obviously you can't turn the Titanic because they did. Just kidding. The boat's dead. The people might still be alive. I have no idea. And I don't know if they had smokestacks, but let's just pretend this is the Titanic before they had this big hole and everyone died. Okay. And so the idea is it's much easier and more nimble to move a small boat. Now, let me give you the actual math. So this is cute, but let me tell you the actual business behind this. We use a term that we call nail it, then scale it. All right. And it's really nail it in order to scale it. And the problem is most people learn how to advertise. They learn how to sell a little bit and then think, oh, I just need to do more of that. But here's the problem with that. Until you find out what the compounding vehicle is within your business, you're bound to plateau. And so I've done this example before, but I think it's so powerful that it's worth repeating. All right. So let's say that you have company A and company B. All right. And both of them sell 100 people per year. Okay. So 100 new customers per year. Sorry. A sells 100 per year, B sells 100 the first year, 200 the second year, 300 the third year. Well, which company would you rather have? At face value, you'd think, oh, I'd rather have B. But wait, there's more. Let's say company B loses 100 customers every year because they're not that good at what they do or they don't have a very good model. And so that means that next year they lose 200 and next year they lose 300. Now, let's say company A keeps 100% of their customers. So year 2, they actually have 200 customers. And year 3, they have 300 customers. They have the original 200 plus this 100, so now it's 300 in total. So both of these look like they're 300 sales per year businesses. But which of these would you now rather have? This guy. Because the margins are going to be better because you don't have to pay to acquire all of these extra customers. They had to pay to acquire 600 customers, right? This one only had to pay to acquire 300. All of that added cost drops straight to the bottom line. But on top of that, this is a business that literally will always keep growing. If you think about it, every year you could sell another 100 customers and it would just keep growing. This business, next year, if you sell another 300, the only way to grow is to sell 400 customers next year just to keep up with A. And I can promise you, one of the laws of nature is that advertising to acquire customers only becomes more expensive in time because you are going out to colder and colder audiences that are less and less of a fit. You're not getting the early adopters. You're actually getting the laggards and the late adopters. And so it costs you more to reach them. They're harder to sell. They're more price sensitive. Like, it has all the negative things. And so this is common when companies look that are bigger, if they're looking to exit. The acquirers, and who's an investor, is going to look at this and say, how much runway is there that's left? And is there a way that we, one, at the very least, can maintain the customers we have, and ideally have some sort of vehicle inside of it that allows those customers to bring us more customers? And so imagine that, let's say you're here, and then you watch this video, and unfortunately I've had a lot of business owners who watch my stuff realize this, is that they're like, oh no, I'm this business, and I'm selling 300 people every year, and I'm losing 300 people every year. Well, what do I do now? It's tough because you're in a rock and a hard place scenario. And this is why it's so important to nail it, then scale it. And so you just want to advertise and sell enough so that you can figure out what is required in order to keep customers, keep them happy, keep them referring, keep them paying. If you can't figure that out, there's basically no point to scaling. It's going to get more and more expensive, your margins are going to get thinner, and it will feel more volatile because you probably rely almost exclusively on paid ads. That's tough. And so having a different way to think about it, which is you want to get the foundational unit right. Once you get that right, everything else gets much easier. I'm a huge consumer of software startup, founders. And one of the things that they talk about a lot is it's so much better to just build your product or build your service for 100 people to absolutely love you than to have 1 million people who kind of like you. I think part of this is that it's very difficult to build something for the amorphous, for the faceless masses, but it's much easier to build something for a specific person, of which there happen to be many and many of those people. And so I think getting really crystal clear, this is why having an ICP or customer avatar, whatever you want to call it, some sort, and you can name them. It's this is Jenny, this is our customer. She has 3 kids and she, wants to lose weight or whatever it is, right? Would Jenny like this? What would Jenny think about this, right? And some of the best companies that I've seen from a product and branding perspective always basically have Jenny sitting at the table or their customer avatar, and they're like, well, what do you think Jenny thinks about this? Right? And that's what allows them to make the best long-term decisions for both the customer and the brand. For the love of God, if the economics that you have when you're small aren't amazing, they're not going to get better when you get bigger. And so if you're like, okay, that's great, Alex, but how do I tactically improve my offer or my offering to the marketplace? So inside the offer book, I talk about this, which is creating your Grand Slam offer, part 1 and 2, which is basically the problems and solutions. And so I think one of the best exercises that anyone can do with their team is, and if you're just the team, then it's just you, right? Is to sit down and say, let's write down I'll walk you through it. So the first thing we're going to say is, what's the dream, right? What does Jenny want? What is her big outcome that she wants to have happen? Okay, now that we define that, we want to be as crystal clear about that as we possibly can. It also feeds in the messaging, sales scripts, copy, etc. The second thing is we're going to talk about what are the problems? What are all the things that are getting in the way of her getting her dream, of accomplishing what she wants to accomplish? And we want to be, as specific as possible here. Now, typically, there's really one big dream, right? But there's many problems that get in the way of that dream, right? It's very simple to just say, oh, I just want a 6-pack. That's a dream, right? But what are all the things that are preventing you from getting your 6-pack? It's probably you don't know how to cook food. You don't know how to grocery shop. You don't know how to weigh yourself. You don't know how to count calories. You don't know how to lift weights. You don't have time to go to the gym. You have to make different food for you as you do for your spouse. There's almost unlimited problems that can manifest. And all you have to do is ask somebody listen to their excuses. That's what the problems are going to be. All right. Now, once you have the problems, what I want you to do, and this is a mental exercise, is you list them as solutions. So after you have all the problems, you're then going to list them as solutions. So the solution's going to have 2 parts to it. One is you want to have some sort of name around it that's okay, you don't know how to cook food, so we have our You don't have to cook food system, all right? Now, underneath of that, we're gonna have every possible way that we can think of, and this is probably the most creative, fun part, right? You're gonna list every possible creative way that you could solve it. And I'm saying, like, you can't think about cost. You have to be purely brainstorm. And so, by the way, fun rule for brainstorming is that you never say no, you just add to things. You say, that's amazing, and. So it's a lot of and thinking, not or thinking, because a lot of good ideas are on the third or fourth iteration, all right? And so, for example, with this meal thing, I could myself drive to their house and I could cook their food for them. I could do that, right? Like, let's write it down. What else could we do? We could hire a chef to do that. Okay, cool. What else could we do? Maybe we hire a chef for lots of people. Oh, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Oh, what else could we do? We could do a grocery store where we actually take them shopping. Okay, well, could we do a recorded version of that? We could do a recorded version of that too, right? And so all the things, you think about all the different ways you could solve it. When you think about this, you're like, wow, there's like 20 ways I could solve this problem. Right, which then leads you to step 4, which is I call the trim and stack. And this is probably the most business-oriented part of the 5 steps, all right? Which is you have this big list and you say, okay, if we were to rate these on which of these are very high value and which of these are low cost, we want the ones that are super high value, super low cost to be our first priority. Now, the second bucket, and this is something that I've probably changed that might be a little different than what I have in the books. This is a little bit of an update, is I am more okay with what about some things that are incredibly high value that have some cost? Because a lot of people immediately go to zero cost solutions because they want to just have something that costs nothing. The thing is it's very crowded in the zero cost solution market. But you know what's not that crowded? The little bit of cost solution or the medium cost solution, but very high value. And so the thing is that this process is an unconstrained ideation process. And the reason for that is we have yet to determine our price. And so you might be like, well, I can't drive out to their house. Could you for $1 million? Probably. Well, then it's not off the board yet, right? So we just want to think, what is the most valuable combination of these things? Then we go to step 5 and we say, this is now our valuable thing, our valuable Grand Slam offer for whatever amount of money that you want to charge that makes sense relative to your trim and stack. And this process, I'm telling you, if you're like, man, my customers aren't in love with my product yet, then build this out. And here's the thing. In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to show you the system that's responsible for the vast majority of my material success. And inside this, I'm doing this at the live launch event. I'm going to show you how to get customers to spend more money with you in less time over and over again. But that's not all. On top of that, there's going to be 4 amazing bonuses that are available to anyone who wants to pre-order before the event. And on top of that, I've got one secret project that I've been working on for over 2 years that I'm going to be releasing live at the event itself. Now, I can't tell you what it is yet, but I can tell you that it's better than an NFT and it's less than a Bitcoin, and every single person who shows up live gets one. But you got to be there August 16th. So click, register, and I'll see you there live. It's much easier, and this is unfortunate, but it's much easier to promise these things than it is to deliver them. And so the reason that I emphasize the nailed and scaled is that if you do have multiple components to your service, your product that you want to deliver and have this be an incredibly valuable thing, this is very compelling when you present it to somebody, which is why you can raise your prices, you can make more profit, you can market better, can sell better when you follow this framework. But if you can't deliver, you don't want to scale it yet. You want to keep working on it. And the reality is that it's going to take a lot longer than you think. It's like this has just been a very hard lesson learned for me, is that what you think should take you 6 weeks, oftentimes takes 6 months, sometimes a year. And so what you realize the longer you do business is that there are just far fewer new things that you can take on than you really think. And so there's always going to be an issue with translating these things to your team so that they can actually execute, and forget about new people coming in who haven't even gone through this process. They're just adopting this final solution, but they don't know how you got here and how you derived it. And so being more patient about the idea, and I'll give you a pro tip. There's a little side quest for you. So in any given function, let's say that this is your baseline of performance, all right? Now, whenever you change anything, in my experience, you get about a 20% decrease in performance immediately. All right, so if you change a sales script, you get a decrease in performance. You change your ad copy, you're going to decrease in performance. Oftentimes, you change your landing page, most times the page that you had probably was working, and so something that's not that has a lower likelihood of succeeding than something that is more of that, right? And so a lot of times when you make a change, and this is especially operational changes more so than anything else, oftentimes you get a decrease or decrement in performance. And so if I know that I'm guaranteed to have this 20% decrease, then it means that I need to make changes that I have a very strong idea that they're going to have at least a 20% increase effect. And so the result of this line of thinking, which has made me a significantly better entrepreneur, this is a huge breakthrough for me, is that number one, some things will never get fixed. And that means that some things you're like, man, this could be 5% better. The cost of the change, if you are constantly changing things, because here's the thing, is you're like, well, it's still, I'd be willing to give the 20 to 4 months from now, have the, return to baseline and then get the 5% improvement. Yeah, but that assumes that you're going to change nothing else in that 4-month period. But you might be an ADD entrepreneur and you might just change it, which means that you're actually permanently kind of sitting at this 20% decrease in performance because you've never given anyone a chance to get good at their job. You're always changing shit. And so I traditionally will over-index now on stability because we get consistent improvements in performance across the team because people just get better at their job, right? And then if I really think that something's worth changing, it better be north of 20%. And so it's like, man, I keep doing the math. Like, I think this is like a 30 to 50% boost for us. If that's the case, then it's probably worth the bet. But most of the small changes that I used to mess around with my company where I'd be like, oh no, I'm Steve Jobs, every detail has to be there. Like, if you're building a physical product that is manufactured, that's different. If you're building software, one-time change, different. In a service business, if you're changing process that people have to execute, very tough. Make sure that it's worth it. And to bring this whole offer stack idea back to being an underdog, if you do this when you have zillions of customers, way harder than if you just have a handful, because you can change the back, like you can be more nimble. And so the smaller your team is, the more agile they'll be, the less this decrement in performance will be as a result. If it's just you, I mean, you don't need to communicate it to anyone. You can just change, right? And so, like, again, think about that as the natural extreme. On one side, it's just you, so there's basically no change in or decrease in performance. Now, you have to learn stuff, but you'll learn it quickly, right? But if you have to translate it to a 50-person team, it's like, you better be darn sure that it's good and worth it. And so this is another advantage that you have of being smaller. So nail it first so that you're not gonna have to change this later because it's gonna be costly. And so the third big reason that there's a huge advantage of being an underdog is that your competition changes over time. Let me kind of break this down for you. So in the beginning, the big competition, you can maybe make the argument this one's always there, right? Is you. You are the competitor, right? Like, you have to get yourself off the couch. Like, the person you're competing against is like lazy version of you that you think you need to be better than, right? Now, let's say that you're like, you know what? I finally believe that I could do this. Okay. Well, who's the next big person that you're gonna have to face? It's gonna be your family and your friends. Because now some of you guys have amazingly supportive friends and family, and I am so grateful for you. But for everybody else, a lot of those people aren't gonna believe you. They're not gonna believe in you, they're not gonna believe you, they're not gonna believe in your idea. And they'll say sometimes snide remarks, sometimes they'll scoff at the trade-offs that you're willing to make, right? Like, you're like, well, I can't go to that event because I need to keep working on this. And then all of a sudden now you're costing them. Right? Because the thing is that fundamentally they have this relationship with you and it's based on these expectations. And you're saying, you know what? I'm changing the expectations of our relationship. And most people don't like when things change. And the reality is that I'd say that in the earliest part of my career, this was by far the biggest part that was painful, is the friends that you move on from. Because you say, hey, this is the terms of our new relationship, if you want to call it that way. And they'd be like, well, I don't agree to those terms. And you're like, well, then I guess you can't really be here anymore. And it's kind of tough because the thing is like, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, like, they will just say, you know what, I would rather have these friends than my dream. And if that's you, amazing. You won, you made a decision. But I would just advise you to say, like, is it really worth it? And I would say that a lot of people that I've had in my life have come and gone. And I've been very grateful for the work that I've been willing to do. That's Alex, one thing. You can do whatever you want. And I don't know anything. I do have 3 cameras though. So, just saying. All right. So what's the next competitor? So now the next one is going to be employees. Now, it's not necessarily that you're going to be employees. So think of these more as like bosses you have to face that you have to get over. And these never go away. So it's like they add on top of each other. You're still going to have to conquer yourself at every level. You're still going to have new pressures from friends and family at every level. Now you got to sell employees on your dream. You have to recruit really smart people because if you want to do something good, you're going to need help. All right. Like there's an old African proverb that I love, which is if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think big things are accomplished with teams. Because fundamentally, like anything that's really big and worth doing takes a tremendous amount of expertise and it takes time to learn all these different skills. And so like you can't live 20 lifetimes. And so like no matter how smart you are, it's you have a lot more leverage finding people who are exceptional at these things and just bringing them in. So like, oh, I'm going to leverage this 20 years that they already spent there. I don't have to spend those 20 years. I have all that experience and skill set. I'll just bring them on in, right? Now, the next level that ends up coming up, and this is the bigger businesses will hear me in the room, you're going to have marketplace changes, because now you're big enough where like markets do move you, right? When you're really, really small, like basically, like, it doesn't matter how small the industry is. If you're trying to make $100,000 a year, you can do it. Because the industry is probably, if it is an actual industry, is going to be significantly larger than $100,000, right, in terms of revenue. And so it's almost an inconsequential amount of money, not saying to you as a person, but to like in general for a marketplace, it's not a lot of money. And so as you get bigger, like if a market shrinks by 20% and you're a huge part of that market, like that will affect you, right? And also to the same degree, as you make more money, regulators begin to target you and try and find things that you are not being compliant for. Like Elon talks about this now. This is not a political comment. I'm just saying, like, if you look at Amazon, look at Fortnite, look at Reebok, just in the last year, all of them have been hit with FTC suits around something that's not compliant. And so I will just say one thing on this, and then I'll move on, which is fundamentally when 100% of businesses are not obeying some law, then there's probably a deeper question, which is,